Hello and welcome to the Microbiome Medics podcast. I'm Dr. Siobhan McCormack.
And I'm Dr. Sheena Fraser, and we're your co-hosts.
We are both GPs and lifestyle medics with a shared passion for microbiome science. We'll be translating the evidence and packaging it into actionable, bite-sized chunks so that you can harness the power of the microbiome to improve your own health and that of your patients.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Microbiome Medics podcast. I'm Dr. Sheena Fraser, and today I'm joined by Dr. Nihan Maron. Dr. Nihan is a doctor of veterinary medicine, and she has a PhD in microbiology. She's joining us all the way from Kansas in America today, and we're going to be discussing pet microbiomes and the impact that pet microbiomes can have on us, as well as lots of other areas that Dr. Nihan's interested in. So, introduce yourself, Dr. Nihan.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Fraser. And thanks to everyone listening. I'm so happy to be here. As you mentioned, as a veterinarian and microbiologist, one of my solid patients is exploring the fascinating world of microbes and, of course, probiotics and microbiomes. And this is not only limited with the human health, also our beloved pets as well. So especially with the recent developments showing us how probiotics and microbiome science can influence the overall health, I am happy to discuss all these topics here with you today.
Fantastic. So I was quite interested when I was researching the course that Siobhan and I wrote. We were looking into the impact of our gut microbiome from the environment around us. And one of the biggest areas of impacts are, what else is in our immediate environment. And pets are a big part of that. I'm a cat owner. So I love my cats, and I'm really interested to hear about cat microbiomes, but also how the cat microbiome might influence my microbiome and, what happens to both of our microbiomes when we're cohabiting in the same house. So Dr. Nihan, can you just tell us a little bit briefly about, pet microbiomes in the first instance and what got you interested to learn more about this?
Absolutely. So, we know there is an interconnection microbiomes between human and animals, which we're going to focus on the pets today. As we know, the microbiome is, we can call it as collection or a complex community of bacteria, fungi, viruses, and they are living in and on our body. So, this is exactly the same for human and pets. So we can call it, all of those microbial communities are essential for functions like digestion, immune regulation, and also the mood modulation, both for human and animal. Of course, there are some differences in terms of the characteristics of these microbiomes, but there is very fascinating part for me with all these studies. So the studies shown that the pet owners, they often share microbial similarities with their pets. And this comes from just the close physical contact or even the shared environments. And also studies found out that the households especially with the dogs, they tend to exhibit higher microbial diversity. So this is very fascinating for us. Unfortunately, until now, we don't have lots of cat studies as we have dogs. But I am very optimistic on that. We are working on this too. I personally believe that this is a wonderful aspect and which going to help us for the future focus for our immune systems, disease metabolisms, and how microbiomes and these interactions between human and pet microbiomes can help to understand this better for us.
So essentially, our animals have microbiomes that are similar to us. They have a large, densely populated gut microbiome, do they? And they, separate oral microbiomes, skin microbiomes. Are they similarly populated in the same way that humans are?
Almost we can say yes. So we can call the microbiomes for pets as we call it for humans, like gut microbiomes, skin microbiomes. And the metabolism of those microbes in the microbiomes are quite same. So, for example, we are planning to have a study recent times. So we just want to see what happens if we keep the cats in a shelter environment and how their microbiome would react to this, what type of change we will see. And after we have those cats adopted and they start to live in a house environment, what type of change are we going to see in their microbiomes? So we are expecting to see, of course, some nice and positive interactions between their owners. But also we know that the pet owners will have kind of a change and hopefully a positive change with being an owner of those pets, of the cats. So this is another excited factor for me to focus on.
Fantastic. Okay, so if pets have similar microbiomes to us, do they have very similar disease processes caused by disturbances in their microbiomes the way that humans do?
Yes, definitely. We can call this the same way. Most of the diseases are coming from the immune system. And if we don't have a nice and boosted immune system, unfortunately, we are automatically becoming open for most of the infections or metabolic diseases even. Immune system is our kind of guard for bats, right? So I can call that, yes, for pet animals, dogs and cats, actually for most of the animals, this is same. So one of the things that as a veterinarian for the last 20 years, I'm just trying to put lots of probiotics and trying to cut unnecessary use of antibiotics for animals to not to harm their immune system, but just trying to boost the immune system with these nice interactions between probiotics and their microbiome.
And so what did you discover then with that? So essentially, were you using the probiotics sort of as a daily preventer for infections, or were you using it as a treatment for infections?
I can say both. Unfortunately, still today, we don't have so many studies that we can show the effects of difference between using the probiotics every day or just for treatment. But what we have, we know that we can use specific probiotic strains for animals, as we do for human, to treat some, especially some infection-related infectious diseases. Also, again, for boosting the immune system is very important approach for us to use the probiotics. Especially I can call it last 7-8 years maybe, the focus are going more and more on the metabolism of individual microbes and their effects as probiotics on different human or animals, which we can call this like not all the probiotic strains are useful for every diseases, or not all of them are doing great job for all the cats, all the dogs, or human. So we are just still trying to understand the separation. And thanks to today's innovative approach and, all the laboratory environments and all the studies my colleagues trying to focus on, we are knowing more and more every day.
So in the human setting, we're using probiotic supplements really experimentally at the moment because we don't really have great data on their use for health conditions. And as you say, you could give, 50 people with a chronic disease like Crohn's or rheumatoid arthritis or something. You could give 50 people the probiotics and only a small proportion might glean any benefits. So it appears that probiotics are much like drugs. They seem to interact with the gut microbiome, and different people's microbiome will interact in a different way. And as such, some people respond well to them and others not. Is it the same in the pet world?
Yes, it is same because of the focus. I personally believe, as a microbiologist, we are a little bit late on this topic, unfortunately, but I am still optimistic. We are discovering so many new things. Using the probiotics as experimental, as you mentioned, yes, you are right. We are still at that stage. But for animal side, I can say that we have started to use probiotics earlier than pets for poultry and, the dairy, the cows, to increase their yield and for farming. And even before that, we have been using those, let's call probiotics, but in this case, we are calling them beneficial microorganisms for agriculture. So focus was mostly in those eras to increase the yield, the quality, And recently, when the science started to focus more and more on the pet animals, we started to think, how this probiotic strain can work at cats or dogs if they are well known that working for human. One of the most famous way, I think, to promote the probiotics has been long time for using them for some gastrointestinal problems like enteritis or diarrhea, right? So actually for pets, this started from that way too. But currently we are in a more broad approach to understand the overall usage of probiotics or which strains we need to pick. And as you know, there are kind of great developments on that for both human and pets. Like currently we are able to understand our microbiomes, what we have and what we are missing there. We are able to calculate or measure that. And this goes the similar path with pet animals as well.
So I can understand in the agricultural industry where we're trying to, bring up a lot of animals very rapidly. And we've had a long history of using antibiotics in this setting, haven't we? Which is very damaging to the gut microbiome of the animal. But if we're bringing up animals in barns or in sort of more sterile environments, then they're not really getting the expansion of their microbiomes that they would have if they were being brought up outside, where they were able to interact with the earth and with other animals. And animals are coprophagic, aren't they? So they tend to sniff and eat other animals' stools. So they will be expanding their microbiome all the time if they're outdoors, if they're free range. Whereas the intensively reared animals don't have that opportunity so much. So is that why they tend to respond to being given probiotics, do you think?
Actually, this is a great point to start the explanation from antibiotics and some type of chemical use, as you mentioned. I definitely want to talk about those antibiotics part, first of all, because I see them antibiotics are like a double-edged sword. As a microbiologist with PhD, I definitely cannot say that antibiotics are bad guys all the time, or the chemicals. They are definitely essential for treating infections for us doctors, but I will here call a bad guy, and it is the overuse or, the unnecessary use, or even using them out of the target infection, because these can all lead to dysbiosis or the imbalance in the microbiome. So not only antibiotics, when we talk about the agriculture, of course, there are lots of other chemicals who we know right now, they are damaging our microbiomes. They are not only microbiomes, they are also able to damage our nervous system, our genes, right? They somehow make us more in a potential to get something like metabolic diseases like cancer and other stuff. So in both humans and animals, we can say that antibiotics and chemicals can wipe out the beneficial bacteria and leaving an opportunity for harmful microbes to flourish there. But for farm animals, this is quite different stage, and we have to take care of more and more because we are consuming, as human, we are consuming their milk, their meat, right? Because of this, we have to start thinking to have more clean, less antibiotic, less chemical usage, to have a right and balanced natural microbiomes starting from these animals, actually starting from their feet, and then this comes along the way to our pets and to us. So yeah, also as a veterinarian, I can say that in veterinary practice, we also observed that the extensive use of antibiotics, and when this combined with the targeted probiotic interventions, even this can help mitigate some of the negative effects. So it is a reminder to maintain the microbial balance. But as human, we always suggest using probiotics to keep the microbiome balanced during the antibiotics treatment or right after that.
And are there specific probiotics that you found that are particularly useful in animals? And are they at all similar to the types of probiotics that we found useful in adult humans?
There are lots of them. But again, I wouldn't say, hey, we have, for example, Bacillus subtilis, and it is great for all the cats and all the dogs and even all the humans. No, we know there are lots of microbes that we need to promote in the body. But currently our focus is to understand which strain needs to be used for which treatment. And this doesn't end here. We also need to understand the environment and genetic conditions and overall microbial health. So in the past, I think it is more than 20, maybe 30 years now. I don't remember the numbers, sorry. We have been using specific microbial strains to treat gastrointestinal issues with human. This is a well-known system. Okay, we can just use some yeast to treat the enteric conditions, the diarrhea, and this is still same for human as well, and for pets as well. But if we are talking about which probiotics strain needs to be promoted in the microbiome, this still needs to have some more invention, I think, and we still need to use technology on that to understand the overall concept. And I call it, actually, most of my colleagues started to call it like ID, microbial ID. So we all have an ID through our microbiome, and we have to find the right concept to reach out and make the microbiome happier and healthier by picking the right probiotic strains.
My thinking around certainly animals that we are breeding for food is that a lot of the problems that we have in our industrial farming system are created through the way that we actually bring them up, because we are bringing them up in such a sterile environment, because they don't have access to fresh air, nature, earth, other animals, insects, all of these things will shape the animal's microbiome. And if you deprive an animal of being outside, you're going to damage that microbial diversity and you're going to make them more vulnerable to infections. And then if you add on top of that antibiotics that are given to promote growth, and then abnormal feeds that are again given to promote growth, like grain feeds for animals, that will further add to the loss of diversity. What's your thinking on this? I mean, I had an interesting conversation with a guy from the Soil Association on a previous podcast around this very topic. What's your thinking on this?
Yeah, this is a great point, but please don't hesitate to stop me if I talk so much on that. Sometimes it is very difficult for me to stop myself with my experience around 15 years all around the world to see the difference between naturally farmed animals and the other ones. So definitely there is a huge difference between the animals, the farm animals who are exposed to the natural sources and, the fields, and keep, if we can keep them away from the antibiotics and chemicals, it really makes a huge difference. But on the other hand, the human population is increasing. There is a concern to keep everybody fed. So this industry takes the animals, farming animals, in a position that, okay, now we need more meat, we need more milk and more eggs. Let's put all the animals in a closed environment and let's see how we can increase the yield. So at that point, for a long time, unfortunately, in some countries such as United States, we still use lots of antibiotics and other growth factors. And of course, we are not proud of that. And I personally believe that in a short time, we will be in a different direction with that. But when I had the chance to compare this to, you can take this as a chain. If you start to think about this approach from the environment you feed, you keep the animals fed on the field, and natural grass and sunlight, vitamin D, non-chemical treated food, and their mood and their improved microbiome, then you are able to get their yields in a healthy way. So sometimes we call this the organic farming or natural farming, and definitely the yield which human or the pet consumes makes a huge difference in terms of the ingredients, like content of the nutritious elements. On the other hand, I had chance to work at and also visit lots of farms which put the animals in closed environments under a roof and trying to keep them, for example, free from the diseases by using lots of chemicals for their food, for their bedding material. And this affects the overall health and immune system, also their yield as well. So I am really dreaming, and I am very optimistic and willing to see a world that we can keep all the animals healthy as much as possible by not using unnecessary amounts of chemicals and antibiotics. This will make a huge difference, believe me.
And if we're consuming unhealthy animals, then it's not really a great surprise that we're getting so unhealthy ourselves. Our chickens are a prime example. They must have all diabetes. They're all obese and it's sedentary and being eating tons of grain. So they must be very metabolically unfit. So we're consuming that as a product, and that's likely to have a big impact on our health as well.
Yes, Dr. Fraser, as you mentioned, we are just keeping them. We are not seeing them as animals that need to some freedom, right? We are just putting lots of chickens in small kind of cages, and we are putting some lights on them, and we are just expecting to get more and more chicken meat from them, or just eggs. And unfortunately, if your focus is only having more yield, you are losing the most important point, missing the most important point in terms of the health. So there are lots of studies, as you know, for the human health. It is not something really that we can be proud of, to consume milk or egg or meat from the animals who were treated with antibiotics or chemicals. This affects our health as well, right?
Okay, so I'd quite like to move on to pets. I have 2 cats, and one cat adopted us, and when he adopted us, he was very underweight, and he was very unwell when we first brought him in, and he's come a long way. He's pretty healthy now, and he's a normal weight, but I think we fell into the trap of trying to feed up this cat and not paying attention to how much food we were putting out. and what happened is my other cat ended up getting quite obese, and I realized that we're feeding predominantly dried food, and I was quite shocked actually when I looked into the composition of dried food. And we tend to go for grain-free and dairy-free for our cats, because I've read that there's a lot of dairy and grain intolerances in cats. So I'd be really interested in your opinion on that. Also, or what you think of dried food for pets, but also how we stop obesity in our own pets.
Yeah. Oh my God, this is a great question, but I don't know if I can explain everything in my mind as a veterinarian here without a big fight right after this podcast. So, yeah, you are right. We are at a point with, thanks to technology, we are at a point to understand better the metabolism of our pet animals. And regarding to the obesity, definitely this we have, as we have in the human part, we have, the genetic factors and environmental factors and feed factor as well. But keeping them healthy in terms of their microbiome and, let's say, their overall metabolic concerns that we need to take care, it is important to keep them fed by only the dry food. Yes, this is possible. Why? Because currently, most of the companies who produce the dry food for animals, for pet animals, now they started to take care of this. And you can see that, like, they are making lots of dry food with probiotics or with prebiotics. And this is something good that we can start to trust. However, as we are checking our kids or our parents or ourselves for the metabolic diseases, if we are at a angle of the obesity or diabetes, unfortunately, we are still not there for our pet animals, right? And we understand something is going wrong when they start to cry. So maybe we need to be more careful other than what we feed them, to observe, to make nice evaluations, to make nice observations. And of course, to be in touch with our veterinarians and showing up on the time comes when we are invited to see our veterinarians. These are most important factors. There are lots of things that you can keep your cats. Like one of the factors is definitely the nutrition for the overweight cats, which we can say that the recent research, if I remember it correctly, approximately 38% of the dogs are overweight, and a little bit more for the cats. So we always suggest to have a caloric management diet, which we can put also most of fermentable fiber, which this will help as a probiotic for their natural probiotics and microbiome, gut microbiome as well. And frequent smaller meals can be another option that you can focus instead of feeding your cat 1 or 2 large meals per day. You can just offer several smaller meals, which you won't be boosting their gastrointestinal system and the probiotics there, the beneficial microorganisms there for huge work instead of frequently regular small work. So there are lots of things we need to take care of that. But again, let's try to focus more, as the industry, I'm saying this, let's try to focus more on the natural feeding options for pets. I am not against for dry food, of course, and I am proud for the developments with their ingredients, which are more healthy and probiotic or prebiotic ingredients. But on the other hand, I think we just need to take care of our pet animals as we are taking care of our kids.
So my understanding is that some of the dried foods, I mean, it's processed food for cats, isn't it? Some of the dried food companies are using things like sweets from food manufacturing and adding them into dried foods. And you think, well, why on earth would you put sugar into cat food? But I mean, my cats are addicted to their dry food. So I wonder if it drives the cats to become more addicted to them. What's your feeling on this?
Yeah, I had 3 kids, and I had, of course, the time that I felt they're addicted to some snacks. Why? Because sugar. And not only sugar, but we know how it affect our brain, our nerves, and easily we can become addicted with if we are consuming lots of sugar, right? Because it affects our nervous system in terms of the happiness when we consume. This is pretty similar with cats and dogs as well. And dry food industry, they are focusing, unfortunately, I have to say again, they are focusing to sell more. And this is the way that if my cat likes the brand A, this means that, they are doing something great, yummy, and delicious for the cats. But if we can keep this yummy, delicious part as much as that part, we can take care of the nutritious part and healthy food part and boosting the immune system, boosting the microbiome, boosting their overall health, metabolic health, I think that will be great. And again, I am happy to see that type of change, especially with the big brands. But still, there are lots of brands who are just not boosting the immune system of cats, dogs, but boosting the sugar amount and some other amounts in the dry food.
And I don't think pet owners realize that they're giving their cats sugar. I mean,
Yeah.
you wouldn't think that they would put sugar into it. I certainly didn't realize that. It was quite a shock to me because I thought, well, that's crazy putting sugar into cat food because, that's going to give them dental caries and it's going to, cause metabolic dysfunction in the same way it does to humans. And why would we want our cats to develop that? So it worries me that that's happened. And I think most pet owners won't be aware.
Yeah, you are definitely right. First of all, cats are obligate carnivores. Okay, so this means that their natural diet consists on primarily of meat. And actually, they have a very little need for carbohydrates, right? And sugars are carbohydrates. So we can definitely say that this is not a need of their natural diet.
Definitely.
Yeah. And also cats are, this is actually something funny that we can say that they are, especially the cats are lack of the taste receptors for sweetness. I mean that they don't crave actually or very enjoy the sugary foods, right? But using the sweet or sugar concept in their food, actually this is coming more than the carbohydrates that keeping the energy level up for the food, I think. But of course, there are lots of health risks of adding sugar, like obesity, diabetes, as you mentioned, digestive issues and dental issues. So yeah, this is something that we need to look out for ingredients about that. And in terms of reading the ingredients list, I know there is a huge portion of humans who are like crazily reading all the labels while buying some food for ourselves or our kids. Maybe we need to start to do this for our animals as well.
Absolutely. Now, if we were to give our pets a natural diet, then presumably that would be giving them meat. Now, not everybody has the stomach for that. If we were to give our cats and our dogs a natural diet, how is it best for them to consume that meat? Because we predominantly give them cooked meat, but of course, that's probably not that natural for them. I know there are more companies nowadays that are giving raw food for dogs and cats, but I'd be interested in what you think would be sensible and, what's a good compromise if you are a bit squeamish and, how would you recommend that you feed your cats and dogs?
The important point to start that, again, the natural needs of the cats, like natural diet of cats. And we know that it's primarily composed of raw meat. Like, in the nature, in the past, while we were not feeding them and they were feeding themselves, they were eating small rodents, right? The birds, reptiles, maybe insects mostly. So since cats are obligate carnivores, which means that they definitely require animal protein for survival, their digestive system are adapted to process raw meat as well. And raw meat provides them with essential nutrients, such as, the protein, fat, taurine, which is a very important amino acid for their heart or eye health. On the other hand, we changed their metabolism after we start to feed them, first with house meals and then feeding them with dry food. So we just, what we have done, we just try to feed them similar concept that they have in the nature. So you can see the basic difference between dog dry food and cat dry food in terms of the protein amount, the meat amount, let's say, in their diet. But if you want to keep your cats a little bit more natural way, first of all, you have to check. You have to change their diet with small steps, not suddenly. And you have to check their genetic and metabolic factors if they are able to consume the new diet or not, if they have some more time to have this change in their diet. So if you don't think that your commercial food or your dry food you are buying for your cat is not formulated to mimic the natural diet enough, you can definitely give a try to raw food diet. This is my point of view as a veterinarian. So there are lots of different, concerns or approaches on that, of course. But on the other hand, as we mentioned just a couple minutes ago, if you want to feed your cat with a raw food diet, which consists of uncooked meat and organs, right? Then how you can make sure those are really healthy in terms of the carriers and chemicals and antibiotics for them, and if you are really doing something good or bad for them.
And I think it's important that if you're going to give animals raw food, they're adapted to deal with bones as well, aren't they? So long as it's smallish bones for a cat and uncooked bones, is my understanding. If you cook bones, do they splinter, become more dangerous for a cat or dog? Is that right?
Yes, we definitely don't recommend to feed cats and dogs with bones, especially chicken bones or the fish. So I have seen, even I have never had a clinic during my students' times and with my colleagues' clinics. I have seen lots of pet animals, cats and dogs, came to the veterinary in the emergency service with that issue. After we feed them with small bones, those little pieces just damage their intestines. And it is very difficult to treat. And usually, unfortunately, we see the death of the animals. So please, please, please don't feed your cats and dogs with bones, especially the chicken bones. But of course, you can boil them. You can benefit their nutrient densities for your animals by boiling and using this water, or just feeding them with meat. Yeah, like a broth or meat. Yeah.
And actually, cats are quite adapted to deal with raw bones, though, aren't they, of small animals? Because, I see my cats all the time crunching up mice and they've even eaten, a pigeon, which is quite big. It's quite big. So there's some decent sized bones in there and they crunch those up. So they are adapted to deal with bones like that when they're raw, aren't they?
Yes. But we mentioned, Dr. Fraser, it is kind of, we are changing their genetics by time. They were in the nature, and I'm talking about like hundreds of years ago. So they were, of course, adapted to eat and consume most of the things that they cannot do right now, because we change them. This is a journey through the time, right? With the domestication of especially the cats, I don't know if we have done something good or bad. Maybe good for us, but not for them.
Yeah.
But starting from the Middle East, from Egypt, and actually not hundreds, I have to say that 10,000 years we can talk about the timeline that we started to have this transition and for the cats from hunting to be our lovely home pets that we just need to cuddle with. And this changed lots of the things. And thinking about the cats are coming from a family from Felidae, which also the lion, tiger, puma, jaguar, right? So you cannot say that don't consume some bones of the other animals. We are changing them. Just need to be careful on that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned taurine. That's really interesting because a friend of mine mentioned taurine recently. Her dog developed heart failure at quite a young age. I think he's only 6 or 7, and he's developed heart failure. And the vet said, obviously we'll give some treatment, medical treatment for this, and then we're going to try some taurine.
Mm-hmm.
And taurine's an amino acid that, as you said, you get from eating raw meats and things like that. But this dog had had a predominantly dry food diet. And when she gave the taurine to him, it was miraculous. His heart failure has massively resolved.
Yeah.
And this dog is like a new dog on the taurine. And we were discussing, the fact that we're giving processed diets to our pets, and we're potentially causing amino acid deficiencies, which could have potential disastrous impacts for our animals if we don't give them a natural diet. What's your experience of taurine deficiency?
Yeah, taurine is definitely a critical amino acid, especially to have the metabolism of pet animals to treat their own cardiomyopathy at some point or keep their heart and overall metabolism healthy. And unfortunately, we see this deficiency in cats and dogs so often. And because of that, most of the dry food manufacturers, now they are trying to add taurine in their diets. So we have lots of stories when we add some taurine or just change the diet to the foods which are rich in the taurine, this amino acid, like maybe scallops, right, from the shellfish. We always try this. Even the meat itself and poultry, some seaweed maybe, and eggs. These are the great animal sources with the taurine. And we see the results immediately. And recently, like a couple months ago, I think, I came across a nice study about that. And it was talking about the taurine on gut microbiota, the homeostasis. So there were, on the study, there were 2 models of gut dysbiosis. And as a result, it was surprisingly the supplementation of taurine gave the result to significantly regulate the intestinal microflora. So this shows us that taurine is not only critical and important for the overall health of the metabolic diseases or heart diseases, it's also important for our microbiota as well, to keep it balanced. And if I remembered correctly, it was one of the lactobacillus strains. So the decrease in the lactobacillus abundance was just reversed by adding only taurine.
Interesting. And obviously, these are animals that we're talking about with the taurine deficiency generally. But is there any? Do you know of any studies in humans, or do you think we could extrapolate that data to humans? I was sort of aware that plant-based diets were associated with improved heart health, but do you think that there are any sources of taurine in a plant-based diet?
Yeah, sure. I am not sure if taurine is used specifically for human health for specific different diseases or conditions, but we know that taurine naturally occurs in foods, right? Mostly with proteins such as meat or fish. But the important part for human body, our bodies use taurine for mostly actions in our cells. So we can call this for the energy production. Also, it helps our bodies to process bile acid and mostly to balance the fluids, salts, minerals. So we know it is very important, but I am not really aware of any, focus to add taurines for some type of treatments.
Oh, well, that's something that perhaps some budding scientists out there can look into for human health.
Yeah.
It'd be an interesting one, definitely.
Sure.
So what? Obviously, we've discussed the human microbiomes and the pet microbiomes. We interact with each other, and we can develop some similarities between our microbiomes. We can share some microorganisms, can't we, with our pets? Are there any pets that you would recommend that we share our microbes with, and pets that you would recommend we don't share our microbes with?
That's a great question. No, I cannot say that. Don't have this pet in your home because of the shared microbiomes. I will just keep them as much as possible in the different states. So let me give you an example. We have moved into Kansas, the United States from Turkey like 5 years ago with my family. And we immediately started to foster some pet animals from the shelters. So we are a volunteer foster family. And what I knew with my first 2 kids for long years as a microbiologist, when I have different pet animals in my home, that winter is definitely kind of less of infectious diseases. So this is something that I cannot, of course, put lots of scientific experiments and, evidences to you, but I know it as a mom and as a doctor, as a microbiologist. When you interact with different type of microbiomes coming from different type of pet animals, including cats and dogs, even hamsters, even birds, your immune system takes all those different microbiome sharing environment as a booster. So this is actually something that I really want to focus more and more in the near future, because one of the things which I realized, put this a little bit back, is the topic that about hygiene. So I call it the hygiene hypothesis. It is not so often, something that I see so often in United States, but in Eastern countries, still there are some people who see this topic as a concern, having some cats and dogs at their home in terms of the hygiene concerns, However, we know that especially the early life pet exposures affects the health very positively. And there are lots of studies right now, and they clearly suggest that if you exposure your kids with your pets at the early life, it causes a diverse array of microbes, and they are essential for developing a robust immune system. So, we can just focus on that more, and how infants exposed to pets have more diverse gut microbes. And I'm pretty sure we can have lots of good clues from here. And especially, I have to say that as having allergic metabolism for myself and allergic one kid, pet-friendly environments are less likely to develop allergic conditions. And this is a finding that supports the idea, these microbial exposures, they prime the immune system in beneficial ways.
So having pets in our house basically diversifies our microbiome. So we get a greater diversity of species in our microbiome, and that can enhance our body's immune system, especially from a very young age, when the immune system in the gut, because 70% of our immune systems in our gut is developing really rapidly. And so if we have that exposure to increased species early on in life, it does appear to offer us protection in the long term from autoimmune conditions, allergies, atopy, things like asthma and eczema, which is a really, really good thing. The only thing that I've come across in contrary to this is about birds. And I was actually reading something that Michael Greger was writing. Michael Greger's a lifestyle medic in America, and he was writing about how people who keep birds have an increased likelihood of hematological malignancies, and they have an increased likelihood of respiratory conditions. I mean, pneumocystis, and there's various different viruses and bacteria that birds can harbour that can influence your health in a non-positive way. So what do you think about birds? And, because lots of people these days are keeping chickens in the UK. Obviously, we worry about things like bird flu, but what do you think about birds and their influence on our microbiome?
Yeah, I definitely believe that their microbiomes also affect our microbiomes in a positive way in general. But thinking about something like, for example, I am personally myself super allergic to bird feather. So I have no way to keep a bird in a cage in my home, and I can control this allergy. But we know that some human metabolism, they are not, or some human beings, they are not able to consume all the chains in their environment. So I will also focus on not one or two studies, but in general way. And I am a natural and holistic approacher. Let's try to understand things and go back to our ancient times and what was the interaction, communication with ourselves and our animals like birds. So there is definitely a microbiome in the birds, and it's it's a community of bacteria, fungi, virus, and this microbiome again same for the birds, including the gut in and on living organisms of their body. And their microbiomes are very important for themselves, for their health and diseases or evolution, adaptation, even behavior, I can say that. However, the interaction between the bird microbiome and human microbiome, I think this is something we cannot make a generalization from one study or, couple different conditions. At the same time, Dr. Fraser, I take this when we call that microbial ecosystem, we cannot just make some limitations easily, saying that this animal is good, this animal is not good. Because probably you know so good about the theory when you let a child grow in the mud, grow on in the nature, they become much more healthy. And definitely the root cause of that is they are in touch with lots of different microorganisms. And this continually interactions give human and other animals, of course, a better microbial ecosystem. And this is the general way, I think, how we need to see that. Of course, there are some, dangerous conditions, kind of infections and other stuff. But generally, I suggest human and animal needs a rich microbial ecosystem, which automatically boosts their immune system.
You obviously have 3 kids yourself, and you invite all your pets into your house, and
Yes.
And that's great. How clean do we need to be with pets in our house? So do you allow pets into your bedrooms? How often are you cleaning up? Should we allow lots of dirt from our animals in, or not so much dirt? Where would you strike that balance?
So we have a saying in Turkish. I don't know if I can translate one-to-one, but we call it like, do what the mentor says, but don't do what the mentor does. So yes, I keep my pets in my bed, and I am totally fine. It is for my kids too. But The most important part as a microbiologist or a veterinarian, I can advise that please try to keep your pet animals under control of your veterinarian. Because in this case, you can make sure that they don't have any diseases, any pathogens in their body that can affect your health, your kids' health. So as long as you keep them healthy and, under all the treatments for parasites and, maybe vaccines, some of them, you can make sure that they are good for your health, even you are sharing the same pillow.
Good. So what are your top tips for improving your microbiome and taking care of your pets in terms of their microbiome?
Yeah, again, the natural approach, the holistic approach, keeping ourselves and keeping our animals, not only pets, all of the animals, in a healthy way, away from unnecessary use of antibiotics and chemicals. I think this is the first thing that we need to take care. Also, there is a very popular saying now called the One Health approach. And it is all about, recognizing that the health of humans, animals, and environment are interconnected. We cannot change this. You cannot just eliminate one of them and keep the rest. In terms of the microbiomes, this means that understanding how our pets influence our microbial ecosystems, it can also inform us broader public health strategies as well. So I'm pretty confident we will see future research which likely focus on long-term microbiome profiling, which we will have more clues and more suggestions for both human and pet animals. But this holistic view has the potential to transform, how we approach health and wellness across the species. So I would like to leave everyone with this thought, actually. Our pets are much more than just companions. And we just need to see them, the active participants in shaping our health through their microbe. And we all share the same environment, share microbiome and the mood at the end of the day, because we know that microbiomes also affect the mood.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that's such an important message to end on. How we treat our pets will have either a positive or negative influence on us. So if we treat our pets really well and enhance their microbiomes, we're going to be enhancing our own microbiomes at the same time. And that's going to be beneficial for our health too. So really important messaging and really good to hear. Thank you so much, Dr. Nihan. It's been a joy chatting to you today. And I'm impressed with the work that you're doing. And I think it's great that you're getting these kind of messages out there to pet owners and to the industry. I think that if we continue to be mindful of microbiomes in all of our animals, then, this is only going to benefit our health in the long run. So thank you. I hope you've all enjoyed this conversation today. Is there anything you wanted to say before we finish up?
Thank you for having me for your podcast. I really enjoy it. I can just try to encourage everyone listening to us right now to stay curious about the incredible world of microbiomes.
Fantastic. That's my mantra too. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a review on Google or Apple. Let me know what you think. Send us your questions. And that's it for another session. And we'll see you again. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Microbiome Medics podcast. We really hope you enjoyed the content and we welcome your feedback. We'd love to hear any suggestions you might have for microbiome topics that you'd like us to cover. And we also appreciate listeners' questions and will endeavour to answer them in the next podcast.